commencer. Camavinga sur un pas, la frappe et but. Oh, superbe but d'Eduardo Camavinga.
This video is sponsored by KlipDraw, a software that we use to edit our videos. If you're interested in using this software too, please see the description below for affiliate links. The French Edgar Davids, or the long-awaited heir to Redondo. Just how good is Eduardo Camavinga? In terms of creativity, Camavinga's penetrative passing is lacking. He lacks the finesse of a Kimmich in terms of consistently rating those smart balls or finding threaded through ball killer passes. It's a combination of a lack of football IQ when it comes to this particular part of the game, as well as certain technical deficiencies in terms of executing the most delicate of passes. He almost plays at too high a tempo, and his brain can't compute what's going on around him, hence why his passing decision making when it comes to killer passes is questionable. It reminds me a bit of Edgar Davids during the early phase of his career, but rather like Davids, he does also have the ability to pull off the occasional audacious assist. So in an ideal world, you wouldn't want Camavinga heavily involved in the final third as the team's regista at this particular stage of his career. He's just too raw creatively.
Still Vinny, just got away from him. The rebound coming to Camavinga, nearly got away from him.
Statistically for a CM, Camavinga has prodigious dribbling ability. He's got a 64% success rate and he's constantly looking to progress the game. Now the eye test takes that analysis a step further. I would say Camavinga has GOAT level talent when it comes to driving with the ball from midfield areas. He's effortless in the way that he eats up yards when he's carrying the ball. He's got a ridiculous range of tricks. He's so agile. The complete package in terms of ball carrying, very reminiscent of Edgar Davids in that sense, an elite winger in a midfielder's body. Now, if there's a slight criticism of his dribbling, it's that rather like Davids, it feels as though these type of players can't function unless they're allowed to dribble. So they often take unnecessary amount of touches on the ball, which can paradoxically slow the game down as the ball isn't being shifted around quickly in the midfield areas. In terms of his goal threat, Camavinga statistically isn't pulling any trees just yet, and one would assume it mirrors the passage that we spoke about on his creativity, the running theme being that he should operate deeper rather than further forward. Having said that, however, I think Camavinga has shown he can strike from range, especially from that inside right channel from just outside the box. Furthermore, he's clearly blessed with elite level footwork. He can drive forward at pace. So in theory, he has a lot of attributes which suggest that he should be a bigger goal threat than what he currently is. Probably his biggest weakness is that composure inside the box and preparing his body to score half chances, a bit like how Jude Bellingham can do. Instead, Camavinga can look quite stiff, so he needs to widen his range of shot technique. In terms of possession, Camavinga is a very accurate passer, but we can see from his stats he's not really a tempo dictator. He's not a regista. But 51 passes per game is not to be sniffed at, especially for a side like Madrid where the influence on the game is shared out between various midfielders like Modric and Kroos. So it's difficult for one player in particular to accumulate the same amount of passes as say Verratti for PSG or for Xavi under Pep Guardiola. Nevertheless, Camavinga has the ball retention skills to fit into any of these possession obsession sides. He's so sharp in tight spaces, generally finds a route out of pressure and finds a pass. This for me is what separates him from Edgar Davids, who also was fantastically, sharp in tight spaces, but was inconsistent with his passing and his decision making. At times guilty of being over elaborate in possession and sometimes hurrying his passes. By the time Davids was slightly past his prime, he slowed down and his decision making got better. But Camavinga's decision making already in that regard is better than what Davids was at the same respective age. In terms of his long passing, statistically, Camavinga's already significant. He's hitting over 70% of his passes over long distances accurately, and we can see that from the eye test. He rarely puts a foot wrong in terms of deciding when to pass it, where to pass it. His switches of play are usually spot on. Slight criticism, the passes are a bit risk averse, i.e. they're a bit loopy, but they always find the target. Now, can he take that one step further and be a Pirlo type figure where even if he's playing in that deep lying playmaker position, can he break down defences with his long passing? Well, he's shown at Rennes that he can create chances with his long passing. And we have seen in those substitute appearances for Real Madrid in the Champions League that he can look for players like Benzema and Vinicius with the long pass. So I do anticipate it being a sort of killer aspect of his game going forward. I don't see it becoming as good as, say, a Pirlo. I just don't see it. But it can definitely become an important feature or a unique feature of his game. Rather like Redondo and not like Edgar Davids, Camavinga has the spring, the height, the lack of fear to be a dominant force in the air. He's especially useful defending from set pieces, and he wins duels with an air of comfort, especially from goal kicks. So that suggests that he could be an influential force in ensuring that his team are on the front foot, a bit like what Fabinho does for Liverpool. Not only will this come in useful if he does settle into that CDM position, but if his legs ever completely go, a bit like how Fabinho filled in for Van Dijk, I could imagine him even settling into a centre-back role in his late 30s. Defensively, Camavinga's a real ball winner. He's got the pace, he's got the tackling ability, he can intercept, he can do what Kante did. Now the bigger question is, can he do what Casemiro did and know when to sit tight as well? Protect that area in front of the centre-backs by being zonally disciplined and reading the game. Now, I personally think his reading of the game is pretty solid for his age, and he has a wonderful use of his recovery pace. He doesn't abuse it. He knows how to position himself correctly to get into that sprint, knows when to not be reckless and dive into the challenge and just stand his man and delay the offense. So he does have CDM traits. I think the bigger problem with Camavinga is because of the way that he carries the ball and he drives forward with the ball, he vacates that CDM position a lot. And that's why I think at the moment Ancelotti and Deschamps prefer Tchouaméni in that role ahead of Camavinga. But definitely from a defensive perspective, he's athletic, he reads the game well, can win his challenges, and I don't really have any major question marks about him from a defensive perspective. Tactically, last season Madrid struggled in the Champions League when they were being too conservative in the first half or the first leg of games. When they were forced to go for broke and they needed to push more bodies forward, they realised that they needed less bodies in the build-up phase, but it still needed to be effective to consistently get the ball from back to front and create goal-scoring chances. They also knew that the opposition at this stage of the game were not going to throw bodies forward in numbers, so they needed less defensive security, but they knew that the opposition would still offer a counter-attacking threat, so they needed recovery pace at CDM. Positional patience and intelligence was less of a requirement in this phase of the game. This is where Camavinga came into his own. He's got that recovery pace to defend counter-attacking situations. He can almost single-handedly run a build-up phase because he's so agile on the ball. He can beat 2 or 3 players and keep that ball going forward into the midfielders in the final third. So that's why Camavinga was such an important facet and player in those phases of the game. This year with Casemiro gone, Camavinga has not been trusted to start at CDM. And the reason why is that Ancelotti and Deschamps both see Tchouaméni as further into his development than where Camavinga is. He's still seen as sort of immature to run a game for 90 minutes. Also, they need someone more stable, someone who's going to hold his position better, someone who distributes the ball more effectively in that CDM position, doesn't take too many touches on the ball, isn't going to be seen driving forward with the ball and leaving a space in front of the centre-backs. So that's why Tchouaméni has got the nod for now. What Camavinga is expected to bring this season is that Edgar Davids thrust from that left-sided box-to-box midfield position and drive the game up the pitch. In conclusion, is Camavinga destined to be the next Redondo? Well, Redondo was one of a kind. He was probably the best midfielder of his generation, someone who had that height, that poise, that technical elegance, but was also quite dynamic. A CDM, regista, DOP, box-to-box midfielder rolled into one. I think Camavinga shares more similar traits with Edgar Davids. He's got that more frantic energy to his game. someone who doesn't quite know when to slow it down. Everything seems to be a bit 100 miles per hour with Camavinga. That's probably why he hasn't got in ahead of Tchouaméni for club and country just yet for the starting role at CDM. I could see them potentially both playing together in a double pivot. I think Camavinga has a higher ceiling than a Tchouaméni. He looks more talented. He's more athletically gifted. He's nimble. Great footwork. There's a lot going for Camavinga. I just think his IQ isn't quite as elite as I'd want it to be in terms of his progress for him to be considered a de facto GOAT level talent. Definitely looks on course to be an intergenerational player, but a lot of things need to go right for him to become a GOAT level midfielder. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share and subscribe, and see you guys again next time. Bye.
Spare for Guardiola, joy for Mourinho.